My name is Fernando Alvarez, and I'll be speaking in part of the presentation for the wind energy group. Let's start off with scope. So this ended up being one of the challenges that we faced throughout the project, and the reasoning behind that was that fortunately for our group, we were able to find an abundance of information, but as the weeks went by and the semester went along, we found more and more information, and we were not any closer to picking a scope. We eventually started realizing that we were running out of time, and we ultimately decided that what we wanted to see was what method would allow us to sustainably develop um, wind turbines at Maverick Creek Wind Farms through 2070. And the way that we ended up making this decision was that we broke it up into three different options. And for each one of those options, we financially, environmentally, and socially observe the different impacts that they create.
Environmental impacts of building a wind farm are vast and far-reaching, starting with the mining of natural resources, then manufacturing of each component in various locations around the world, then transporting each component hundreds or thousands of miles to the site. Land has to be cleared, cabling buried, and roads built. Over the life of the turbine, parts and trucks are used for maintenance. Then, after 20 years of generation, the turbines have to be disposed of through landfills and recycling. I'm Collin Baggett, and in the simplest way possible, I'll try to explain how we compared the environmental impact of three different scenarios to the life extension of Maverick Creek until 2070. Vestas has commissioned an extensive life cycle analysis on the V136 3.45 megawatt turbine, which examines all the factors that contribute to the environmental impact of the turbine's construction and installation. The tables and numbers and categories take some serious time to understand. However, one nice number equates to the total environmental impact of the turbine per kilowatt hour, and it's 7.6 grams per kilowatt hour. This is the number we use to assess the total global warming potential of the V136 over a 20-year period. Global warming potential these days is most looked at by carbon dioxide release. It's the measure of environmental impact that the world is talking about. So the goal of our analysis was to compare the CO2 release of burning natural gas to the CO2 release from producing electricity with a turbine. The turbine's global warming potential, or CO2 release, is overwhelmingly caused by manufacturing. The operation of the turbine and maintenance trucks it takes to keep it working are slim. And then at its end of life, with a total composition of about 88% metal, it is recycled, which actually credits back much of the CO2 that was initially released during manufacturing, giving a circularity index of 0.61, which means if you took the materials it takes to make a turbine, recycled them, and then built a new turbine with them, 60% of the original materials could be used to build the new turbine. Using the EPA's AVERT software, Avoided Emissions and Generation tool, 540 megawatts of clean energy in Central Texas will displace 1,602 gigawatt hours of fossil fuels annually. This is the equivalent of 132,000 average U.S. households. Using the AVERT number, total CO2 avoided over a 50-year lifetime of Maverick Creek was calculated for each of the 3 life-extending scenarios. A 3% decrease in annual CO2 avoided was included for a decrease in the turbine's efficiency. Scenario 1, in which the equipment was demolished, recycled, and completely replaced with new equipment that was twice as efficient, yielded the best results, leading to a conclusion that the global warming potential produced by the manufacture of a turbine plays a very small role in the amount of CO2 produced by burning fossil fuels for electricity generation. In fact, the global warming potential created from manufacturing a turbine would need to be increased by 1,500% before the decrease in efficiency of running a turbine for 50 years would level out with replacing the equipment when new, better equipment is available.
My name is Wade Eaton, and this part of the report is on the social impacts and their potential effects on each method of extending the useful life of the Maverick Creek Wind Farm to 2070. The social impact of wind turbines and their infrastructure has an effect on the implementation of wind energy. This is true on both ends of the spectrum. Public opinion has influenced public policy in favor of windmills as well as against them. For example, the Green Party of the United States specifically advocates for wind and other renewable energies. This party was a large supporter of the Green New Deal, which was a plan to reduce the use of fossil fuels and increase usage of renewable energy. The plan made it all the way to the U.S. Senate. In contrast, military officials in Texas told state officials that the windmills hinder military operations and should not be authorized around bases. This effort led to the passing of Texas Senate Bill 277, which reduces the economic viability of wind turbines in certain areas. These examples just go to show that public opinion is something to be considered when evaluating the future of wind energy. As technology advances and more turbines are implemented, decisions will have to be made on how to increase the production of current turbines or how to replace existing turbines with new ones. Since all 130 of the turbines at the Maverick Creek Wind Farm were manufactured by Vestas, it is assumed that in the future Vestas will refurbish or recycle the turbines they manufacture as is currently done now. For this exercise, it is projected that Vestas will choose one of 3 methods as the most sustainable way to extend the electricity generation capacity of the Maverick Creek Wind Farm until 2070. Method number 1 is to demolish and recycle Maverick Creek in its entirety, then rebuild using the latest technology, which is assumed to have an output 100% greater than the original equipment when installed in 2020. Recycling is generally encouraged, and some companies even advertise that they practice recycling as a marketing tactic. Despite this, a poll conducted by Mason-Dixon in the United States found that while 85% of respondents recycle, most have little to no confidence that the materials actually get recycled. 44% of respondents actually believe that their items are not recycled at all. Since recycling is viewed as neither productive nor harmful, the social impacts of this recycling are not likely to hinder this method. The one aspect of this method that is likely to have negative social impacts and possible pushback is the transportation of the old turbine parts to the recycling center and the transportation of the new turbine from the manufacturing center to the wind farm. In the life cycle analysis put out for the turbine used at Maverick Creek Wind Farm, Vestas assumes a total of 825 kilometers by truck for transporting new parts to the wind farm and old parts from the wind farm. Transporting such large pieces over such long distances disrupts traffic and poses a threat to other drivers. There are many cases of the trucks carrying turbine parts being uncontrollable and causing wrecks. Because of wrecks like these, laws are already in place in certain areas to protect drivers, such as requiring pilot vehicles before and after the trucks transporting large turbine parts. Since laws are already in place because of the dangers involved with transportation, it is safe to assume more laws may come about in the future that can impede Vestas' ability to transport turbine parts. Increased difficulty in transporting turbine parts could make this option less viable. Option number 2, maintain the existing equipment until a true end of life is determined by inspection and weather conditions present over the life of the equipment. A true life of 50 years will be assumed. There's little to no recycling or transportation of large components in this method as there is with method 1. There's no evidence that suggests the public becomes concerned with the age or efficiency of turbines after they are installed. This method is unlikely to have social impacts that lead to influence of public opinion. Method number 3 is that after 25 years, completely refurbish the existing turbines with new equipment using the original foundation and cabling. The cost will be equivalent to 50% of the initial construction cost, and output will be restored to 100% of that in year 1. The potential social impacts of this method are the same as the first method. Large new components must be transported long distances on public roadways, as do the large components that are being replaced and disposed of. In conclusion, the transportation of turbine components and the social impacts associated is most likely to have an influence on the viability of these 3 options. In this situation, method 2 for extending the useful life of the Maverick Creek wind farm is the least likely to have social factors influencing its performance. Method 1 and 3 share equal likelihood of social impacts as a result of transportation. Where methods 1 and 3 differ is method 1 utilizes recycling. Because certain views exist towards recycling, such as the view that materials are not actually recycled, method 1 has an aspect that can have social impacts and potential pushback that method 3 does not. As a result, method 3 is chosen as second least likely to have resistance as a result of social impacts, leaving method 1 as the most likely to have social impacts being influenced.
Hi, my name is Guillermo Alvarez, and I'm going to be explaining the financial aspects of our project. Before we begin, I think everyone should know that none of these values are true to any real Vestas product or any other wind turbines. These were all assumptions made, just so we could have some comparisons between the scenarios. So all 3 scenarios begin with an initial investment of a certain amount for 130 turbines, and it stays the same up until year 25. The reason we picked year 25 is because most of the sources say the average lifespan of a wind turbine is 25 years. So we feel that would be a good comparison between all. Considering in scenario 2, we basically run the turbines until they die off, or there's the operation and maintenance ends up being more than the revenue. So in scenario 1, we actually keep the foundation and the cabling and replace everything else with any technology advances made by that year 25. So it would be like 2045, whatever technology has new then would be used. In scenario 3, we actually reinvest, but unlike scenario 1, we just refurbish with the same parts. So as you could see here in scenario 1, which it goes for all of them, since they all have that initial investment and nothing changes until year 25, the money is made back after year 13. However, it switches that you end up dropping in that percent return after that reinvestment in year 25. For scenario 1, it ends up dropping down to 53%. Scenario 2 just keeps going up. Well, actually ends up staying at 124. That's basically the most that you'll get, considering that at that point, the revenue being made is just above the operation and maintenance. So it wouldn't be a great idea to keep it up when it's costing you more than it's generating. And in scenario 3, it does drop down to 83%. Now this deterioration, that's for the revenue. It's not the deterioration of the turbine. So that's just how much we're expecting the efficiency to drop every year, but we're just considering the revenue for this graph or for this data. We do assume that with the technology advances in scenario 1, the revenue would double after those upgrades. And in scenario 3, after that refurbishment, we do assume that the efficiency would go back to 100. The operation and maintenance costs, that does consider like insurance, basically the land rental, the power to basically run it, just the miscellaneous stuff as well. It's just like a number we were able to like basically assume. Now, when you're comparing all these scenarios, it becomes obvious that scenario one, with modern technology, ends up being the best option. Scenario two, you do end up making the money back, but by reinvesting, you're basically going to get a lot more. So scenario three is a good outcome, but it's pretty clear scenario one is being the best when you end up making more than double of all your investments. With scenario three, you end up with 166% return. And with scenario two, you do end up with 124% return. So that pretty much concludes the three scenarios in the financial aspects.
In conclusion, what we analyzed and what we ended up making as a decision was that while option two has a social impact based on the transportation and how it is viewed negatively because of car crashes that happen over time and stuff like that. While that has a con, you some people would argue that there are pros behind it. For example, creating more jobs for transportation and just for the overall project itself, machinery and other uses. And on another note, financially, option three ended up being the best option. And because transportation is required for all options, regardless of the impact that they create, I think we can argue that option three is probably the best option here. And this is where engineering comes into play because engineers don't just solely make the decisions based on what's financially the best outcome, but also how we could make decisions that are best for the people as well. So that is our presentation.